I'm John McKee, editor of Messianic Apologetics, and I would like to welcome you to this episode of Messianic Insider. All of the links and things I'm going to be referencing, you can access when this episode is over at messianicapologetics.net. They will all be archived so you can watch, read through them, etc. We've got a lot going on right now. We've had a huge weekend of news. Our theology roundup is going to be a little shorter than our news roundup. News roundup is going to be pretty long. We do have a front which has come through North Texas. Had some major rainstorms, even a tornado warning, tornado watch yesterday. So hopefully we're not going to have any problems with the live stream, but you just never know. So I just wanted you to keep that in mind. And you can keep me in your prayers because I get barometric pressure headaches. So hopefully that won't be a problem today. All right, so let's get, before we get started on the theology roundup, please do go, if you have not already, to messianicapologetics.net. Here in the right-hand column, you'll see blog notifications. Be automatically notified by email when Messianic Apologetics is updated. You put your email address in there, then it'll be asked to confirm. Whenever we post something new or reintroduce something to our website, you can receive an automatic notification. That is different than the email update list, which you can subscribe to by clicking on the envelope icon there. That's something we have to specifically put together. You can subscribe to both lists. That would be great. But if you want to stay up to date with what we're doing, blog notifications, you can get an automatic update. All right, so let's start with our theology roundup. On Friday, we discussed, albeit briefly, we didn't discuss every single aspect of slavery in the Bible, but we discussed quite a bit. Last week, when we broke up the episode into shorts, which then get posted to YouTube, Instagram, as well as TikTok. Well, on Saturday morning, I woke up to a lot of negative feedback. Now, that just comes with the territory, especially when you are in apologetics. But when you get negative feedback, you ask the Lord, okay, what do we do with this? And it could be on any topic. Certainly, when we have posted things about the current situation, Israel, Gaza, rising anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, we get a huge amount of free Palestine types of things, from the river to the sea, all of that. But from the feedback we got on Saturday morning, that we have an ongoing volume of Frequently Asked Questions, Volume 2. Guess what? 5 potential new questions came as a result of that. So just wanted to remind you of that and how the business of apologetics is ongoing. Okay, so this past weekend, it was yesterday, I got to go to a friend's wedding here in McKinney. Yes, I got to pull out my Scottish kilt for the wedding. It was yesterday afternoon. I can honestly tell you that they dodged a bullet with the weather because the ceremony was outside, the reception was inside. As soon as the ceremony was over and we all got inside, guess what? It started to pour rain, but it really went well. And this was a Messianic Jewish wedding. It was for some friends of long standing, and we were really honored and pleased to participate in it. But of course, a lot of questions, independent of, say, our participation at a congregation, a Messianic synagogue, the weekly Shabbat, the annual appointed times, Jewish holidays like Hanukkah or Purim, when you go to a Messianic Jewish wedding, questions about the role of tradition and the role of custom and what certain families do or certain families do not do come up. And, most of the people at this wedding were actually non-Jewish, but they were from the bride and groom's pool of friends. You had the Messianic Jewish families, you had the Messianic Jewish friends, you had the Messianic non-Jewish friends, and then you had the greater pool of friends who were there. And a lot of us expected to see certain things, and of course, a lot of us saw things which were unique to their wedding ceremony. That's pretty typical. When my sister Maggie got married almost 10 years ago, she had a Messianic Jewish style of service with more or less traditional Protestant wedding vows, as well as some of the traditional wedding liturgy, although in English, not all of it in Hebrew. My sister Jane, when she got married last year, she had a traditional Protestant style service, and of course, it was with heavy Scottish themes because my brother-in-law is from Scotland, and our family, the McKee family, of course, we're Scottish as well. I'm Scottish American. So, everyone does what they need to do, whether it's Jewish tradition in a Messianic way or people within the Messianic movement who are not Jewish, some of their life cycle, their family life cycle events, they choose to opt for what's more comfortable for them from their family's background. Every situation is different. But yesterday, and some of you all may have seen this on X, formerly Twitter, I also posted it to Instagram as well as Facebook, because yesterday was the inauguration, the papal inauguration of Leo XIV. I had this to say, and this ties into the issue of Jewish tradition. Whether we like it or not, Leo XIV is going to bring with his papacy some revival of Catholicism. Indeed, a lot of people are looking into Catholicism more and more now because of a new pope, and it's only to be expected. You don't get a new pope that often. There's a lot of ceremony, a lot of tradition involved with it. Just like when a European monarch dies, you pay attention to how this is going to affect the world, and you get to see something, especially if you live in the United States of America, you live in a republic. We don't have these kinds of things. So, yes, this new papacy is going to bring some revival of Catholicism, and we continue to monitor that. Now, these are some of the statements I need you to pay attention to. Many Protestants have become disillusioned with the influences of contemporary, informal, non-denominationalism, where they feel more like they've attended a concert than a worship service. They want something more involved and ritual. So if you go to a non-denominational church, you visit a non-denominational church, the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex has got dozens of them, you're going to see things very informal, to the point of, what do you see when the pastor gets up to deliver his message? How is he going to be dressed? What kind of things are going to be in the background? This isn't to say that using PowerPoint slides is wrong, but a lot of these non-denominational churches, they see things like any kind of liturgy, any kind of confession of faith, scripture reading, singing from a hymnal, among other things. Well, that's just dead informal religion, and they see more the informal types of things to be more spirit-filled. Well, a lot of Protestants, and this is just information, this is a fact, while those kinds of models are able to pull in various seekers, they want something more tangible. They want to feel like they've gone to a worship service, like they've gone to church. And so people who have been in non-denominational settings or even Protestant denominations, which are affected by that more informal style, they find a lot of appeal in, for example, Anglicanism, Eastern Orthodoxy, or even Roman Catholicism, where you have the minister or the priest, he's wearing various vestments, they go through some kind of liturgy, they go through some kind of scripture reading, they go through some kind of confessional remark, they partake of the Eucharist. I mean, they do these kinds of things, and people are like, I feel like I've had an experience with God. I feel like I've gone into the heavenlies in some way. Whereas going to a non-denominational church, I feel more like I've gone to a rock concert. So these are the kinds of things which do affect the, for example, people investigating Roman Catholicism right now, or even something like Anglicanism, which is a, Catholicism light. Everything's done in English. It has a Protestant theology, but they still have, the various ceremonies and whatnot. Now, in today's Messianic movement, so we'll read the third paragraph, unfortunately, some of those same non-denominational influences have affected parts of the Messianic movement. Finding a balance between what is traditional and what is contemporary is not always easy, because wanting to have a worship service more informal, you want to be able to reach particularly younger people in a way which they find appealing. And certainly throughout Jewish history, you look at the development of Judaism, you look at the temptations which the outside non-Jewish world has had for younger groups of Jews going back to even before the time of Yeshua. How does the Jewish community respond to the questions raised by Hellenism? A lot of the classical philosophers, Plato, Aristotle, things like that. Not everything Hellenism would ask about the world or the universe was necessarily wrong. What does that mean for Judaism? How does Judaism adapt to some of the new world situations? So wanting to be contemporary, actually has its roots in the biblical period. But fast forwarding to today, every Messianic congregation is different, and every community it is involved with is geographically different. So one's geographical needs fluctuate. But when you go to a Messianic congregation, do you feel like you've been more in a non-denominational church, or do you feel more like you've been in some kind of synagogue? Even if that is a conservative or reform synagogue, what do you feel like? And because today's Messianic community does inherit a Jewish theological, and I would dare say liturgical tradition, you're going to go to a congregation where they have liturgy in Hebrew and English. They're going to have scripture readings, which involve both the canting of the Torah as well as various scripture readings in English. There's going to be a formality to it. But there can also be, and this depends on where you go, there can also be some of those non-denominational influences. Depending on where you visit, it can be more like a concert than a worship service, teaching, and being brought into the sacred presence of God. And one of the biggest challenges people in spiritual leadership have, and this is something I remember going back to even my seminary days at Asbury, ministers and leaders, rabbis, whomever, they have an awesome responsibility to convey to people a sense of sanctity. And how often does that happen in a non-denominational church versus some of these more formal traditions? The Messianic community actually has the tools to do so because of inheriting a religious tradition from the Jewish synagogue. And frequently, you will see that in different Messianic congregations. That doesn't mean we can't have praise music. That doesn't mean we can't have, the spirit to move. But there are a lot of people who are influenced by that non-denominational charismatic style where if it's not spontaneous, it's not spiritual. Reading the Bible, having a scripture reading is something which is supposed to be spiritual, and it's supposed to convey a sense of sanctity. But the reason some of these religious traditions, Anglicanism, Eastern Orthodoxy, even Roman Catholicism, are going to experience an uptick in numbers is because of some of the non-denominational informal styles. Because, after all, if you, and I mean this with all the love and respect in the world I can, but if you go to a religious service, Saturday morning, Sunday morning, and the pastor, the religious leader, gets up and he's wearing blue jeans and an untucked t-shirt, versus you go to some other, more formal religious setting, and the religious leader has gotten up and put these vestments on. I mean, that appeals to a lot of people, and it makes them feel like they've been more in the presence of God. So now, I'm not saying the Messianic community needs to, wear robes and all of this. But these are the kinds of things we do have to take note of. And I remember, being part of going to, I believe it was 2 years ago, the IAMCS Rabbis Conference. And this subject actually did come up from one of the presentations, one of the 10-minute talks. Somebody said, hey, conservative young men really find appeal in some of the formal religious structures of Eastern Orthodoxy and Roman Catholicism, because of the stress they have placed on outward sanctity. And yet some of our Messianic services, and the speaker said, I mean this with a lot of respect, we're not as formal as we probably should be, at least in alignment with the conservative and Reform synagogue. So the issue of tradition is a live one. And of course, there are many different aspects. A lot of us encounter tradition when you go through the annual appointed times or things seen on Shabbat, but actually how much or how little liturgy you use, what type of music you have, how the leadership dresses in front of the congregation, it does affect certain things. And, one of the things, and this is kind of a sacred cow, which I think bends the Messianic community in more of an informal way, is, what's the whole deal with all the Davidic dancing? I'm not opposed to the dancing, but, most congregations I have been a part of, like 10 to 20% of the people during the congregational worship service, and this extends to conference level events, are out on some dance floor. And, that does contribute to one of these informal things, because you never see, that kind of dancing at a Shabbat service at any Jewish synagogue, and you certainly would never see it at any kind of a church. So I think things like that, they deserve some kind of reevaluation in the future. And as we all know, this will not be the last time we talk about the role of tradition, Jewish tradition, and indeed how some of these more traditional historical Christian churches are going to experience an uptick in their numbers, because people want a more formal style of worship. They want to feel like they've been in the presence of something holy and sacred, and that this is not something easy for a lot of people to process. Okay, so let's move on to our news roundup, because we do have a lot of news to go through. Some of this I'm going to try to go through a little faster, because the theology roundup went a little longer than I thought. We're going to note what some of the stories are, because we do the news roundup after the theology roundup, because everything's time sensitive. Everything changes. And these things are to be monitored. Some things we just classify and put it aside. We know that that's ongoing, that's still developing. Other things affect us today. And everyone has an opinion. All right, our first news story, and this is from May the 16th, so this is after our Friday episode. This is from My Charisma. Whether you like charisma or not, charisma does affect more people in the Messianic community than not. One place is everyone goes to for some kind of information, and so if charisma is talking about it, we can certainly talk about it. Okay, so this is a news story entitled, "Could America Be Cursed? Trump's Gaza Vision versus God's Promise to Israel." Of course, we know one of the proposals out there is President Trump, who's coming back from just came back from a Middle East tour. He visited Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and then the United Arab Emirates. What are we going to do with Gaza? So one proposal has been that the United States goes into Gaza, redevelops it, and turns it into a freedom zone. And of course, along with that, a lot of people are talking about, well, if you break up the land of Israel, you're going to be cursed, all of this. This article appeals to Genesis 17:8. I will give you and your descendants after you the land of your sojournings, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession. This wasn't a temporary deal, nor was it subject to foreign development schemes, however well-intentioned. We don't know what's going to happen with Gaza. We know it is a huge mess. That's what we know for certain. Okay, our next story. This is also from Charisma from May the 16th. They're probably not going to be the only ones talking about it in the coming days. California quakes, prophetic warnings, and the signs beneath our feet. Now, there are some issues we do have to monitor in California on the west coast of the United States because of the San Andreas Fault, and that is a highly geologically active area. How much of this is prophecy? How much of this is tectonic plates shifting? I'm glad I don't live in California. I'm sorry for those of you who have to deal with some of this in California. You got to have earthquake insurance. Of course, this article appeals to Matthew 24:7. There will be earthquakes in various places as signs of the last days. As I have reviewed that passage of scripture over the years, there are a lot of people who, when they see, huge earthquakes, they appeal to the Olivet Discourse, because earthquakes, as well as other, weather phenomenon, whatever it is, we've only been monitoring them as a planet for a few hundred years. If we could go back over several millennia, would we find that these things are more normative than not to our planet? I definitely think California earthquakes anywhere need to be paid attention to, because one thing which is different from hundreds of years ago is that in a place like California, you have tens of millions of people living there. And a state like California has the largest economy of the United States. Of course, it'll be surpassed by Texas soon enough. But so any kind of major geological incident, an earthquake, etc., it's going to affect people's lives. It's going to affect economies. And I think that's something we have to factor more in than the frequency or the magnitude of earthquakes. We have to deal with more the effect of earthquakes, the damage of earthquakes, and how some of these kinds of things are happening in places which of course several hundred years ago were not heavily populated. Okay, so here's a post. This is a remark from the United Arab Emirates Foreign Minister Abdullah bin Zayed. And if you've ever seen him, yes, he is Islamic, he is Muslim, but he is, for the Muslim world, for the Islamic world, he is very progressive, and he is a very forward thinker. And this is what he has to say. For the war to end, Hamas must release the hostages and leave Gaza. And of course, one of the things which we need to wonder about, many people in the Arab world, the Islamic world, as this conflict between Israel and Hamas has taken place, why haven't they let in all of these Gazans, especially, Egypt and Jordan? They're right there. Is it because so many of the Gazans themselves are overwhelmingly supportive of Hamas? But look, there is a such thing as moderate Islam, because anyone in religious studies knows it comes down to the interpretation of your religious texts. Just like there is a progressive Christianity and a progressive Judaism, so there is a forward-thinking version of Islam. And that's what the UAE, among others, tries to represent. But of course, we just have to continue to monitor and see. Oh, and one, of course, the interesting things was when Donald Trump went to the UAE last week, he visited this, I forget what it's called, but it's this religious center, and it's got a synagogue, it has a church, and it has a mosque representing the three Abrahamic religions. So this is from End Time Headlines, the 17th of May. Recent reports indicate that the Trump administration is exploring a plan to permanently relocate up to 1 million Palestinians from the Gaza Strip to Libya. Okay, so we have the proposal of redeveloping Gaza into a freedom zone administered by the United States. Here we need to relocate 1 million Palestinians to Libya. What else is going to be proposed? Is there a coherent plan, or are some of these proposals intended to gather the interest of the immediate neighbors because this is a regional problem? Also from the 17th of May, the ground invasion component of Operation Gideon's Chariots has started. So Israel is engaging in a new round called Gideon's Chariots of military activity in Gaza. What's going to come of this? Well, also on the 17th of May, an article from the Jerusalem Post. Trump not frustrated with Netanyahu, says Gulf leaders to help rebuild Gaza. Of course, whenever you're dealing with politics, I mean, the current U.S. administration, the current Israeli government, they're going to have their areas of disagreement and friction. But of course, recently you've heard that there's this huge gap between Netanyahu and Trump. Trump is favoring more the Arabs now. Trump is a businessman, and of course he operates as a businessman in a way completely different than previous administrations. Trump is interested in peace by strength and commerce. He'd much rather have the people of the Middle East involved in an economic war than a military war. But one of the things which is true, if you can get everyone to be economically reliant on one another, the likelihood of there being a military conflict dramatically decreases. But yes, some of these stories about this huge gulf between Trump and Netanyahu, they're just designed as clickbait. They're just designed to sell newspapers. We should not be that concerned in the short term. Instagram, this is from Breitbart yesterday, May the 18th. This is something which gained my interest because the commentary, the summation of it right here, referenced the golden age. Dozens of business leaders and spokesmen are lauding President Donald Trump after more than $2 trillion in deals were made during his Middle East trip, according to the White House. Now, there are some people who are of the opinion that Trump, referring to his second term as America's golden age, that he is going to be responsible for paving the way for the beast system. He might even be the beast himself. I am more inclined to think that Trump's golden age is in reference to wanting to revitalize the economy, pay down the national debt, do business deals, whether it's with the Middle East, other places. That doesn't mean that it can't play into the end time scenario. We'll see. I mean, some of you all have seen the speculation that certainly from the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, no federal income tax on those making more than $150,000 a year or $200,000 a year. That would be great. It's got, of course, pass through all the different mechanisms. What is the golden age going to be? Economic prosperity or a pathway to the anti-Messiah? People talk and we monitor. All right, so to completely change the story, this came out May the 17th from the Roy's report. Of course, some of you all know the ongoing Michael Brown situation. Has Michael Brown lost his entire board? You can find the link to this article when this episode is archived on messianicapologetics.net. Because the Messianic community is very small, everyone has to come to their own conclusions regarding the Michael Brown situation. And I've said from the beginning, I don't think this is going to end up very well for us. I'm more disappointed than not with this whole issue. Okay, the New York Post yesterday, May the 18th. Breaking, the Israeli military has launched a large-scale ground operation across the Gaza Strip over the weekend as part of a major new offensive against Hamas. So this is Operation Gideon's Chariots. Instagram, this came across my feed over the weekend, and it plays into a lot of what we talked about in the Theology Roundup. After Pope Francis's death, global Google searches for how to become a Catholic surged by 373% in just 6 days. According to Vatican travel analyst Magdalena Petrusik, this wasn't a tourism spike, it was a spiritual awakening. Okay, that's not a huge surprise. You know, Roman Catholicism is going to get some renewed interest because of a new pope. How many people are going to get sucked into Roman Catholicism as a result of this? And of course, there's now, new speculation and new rumors about Pope Leo XIV wanting to have closer relationships to Eastern Orthodoxy. So that's something we're going to have to monitor. We wait and see. Okay, our next story. This was interesting from Benzinga about Elon Musk. If you're banking on Earth being around forever, Elon Musk has some grim news. We're living on borrowed time, and the sun has the final say. So scroll down a bit. According to Musk, the clock is already ticking. He claims that if Earth has been around for 4.5 billion years, then Earth only has about 10% more life in it before it gets so hot that life is impossible. Now, you do the math on these numbers right here, 4.5 billion years, the Earth has about 10% more life in it. So that means what? Another 450 million years before we have to start worrying about where we're going to go, what we're not going to go. Musk isn't just doomsaying. He's pitching a plan. Colonizing Mars, he argues, is humanity's best shot at survival. Mars is life insurance for life collectively, he told Waters, that's Jesse Waters. We have a long way to go. It's not just about landing on Mars and fancy equipment. It's about creating a self-sustaining city on Mars. Now, I do suspect I'm one of these people who believes that Yeshua the Messiah will have returned long before our sun begins its transition from a yellow star to a red giant. Those of you all who follow the Superman comics knows that that's what happened to the Krypton star, at least in the one interpretation of Superman. The red star Krypton got too big and the planet got engulfed in it. So that's why Kal-El, Superman, had to escape. The same thing is expected to take place with our solar system. But, for me, when I hear these kinds of things, our star only has so much more stellar fuel left in it, 400 million years. We've got to begin colonizing other planets as an insurance policy for the human species. What kinds of secrets about the universe is Yeshua going to bring with him when he returns? That's a question I know is being asked by more and more young people. So probably not going to be the last time we hear about Elon Musk wanting to colonize Mars. I know a lot of people who would love to just leave Earth today and get off of this planet because they think that the likelihood of there being some kind of warfare on Mars is far, far less than on Earth. Okay, Instagram. Now, this was a story which actually hit when I was at the wedding yesterday afternoon. So this is the first one which came up on my social media feed, but some of you all are definitely aware of it now. From the New York Post, former President Joe Biden has been diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer, a spokesman announced Sunday. The diagnosis was announced after doctors found a small nodule on Biden's prostate during a physical exam earlier this month. And indeed, you look at some of the other reports. Former President Biden has got, stage 4 prostate cancer, and it has metastasized into his bones. Now, this is going to ask a lot more questions than answer them. And some of you all have probably already seen some of the other news reports. How do you get this advanced stage level of prostate cancer and not know about it until now? Especially when, I don't know, when you are the president of the United States, even the vice president of the United States, you have America's best physicians, best doctors, best military doctors constantly monitoring your health. And we just are now finding out about this advanced aggressive prostate cancer that former President Biden has. So a lot of people are going to ask a lot of questions. How long was this really known? And what about President Biden's declining mental faculties and a whole lot of other things which are going to be asked? So yeah, everyone in America should be wondering. Okay, we've got 3 more stories. This is also from the weekend from Breitbart. During this week's broadcast of FNC's Sunday Morning Futures with Maria Bartiromo, FBI Director Kash Patel discussed the 2017 claim that President Donald Trump's first presidential election win resulted from Russian collusion. So the headline is actually FBI Director Patel says transparency on Russia collusion claim in a week or two, the biggest DC deception game we have ever seen. Okay, so we've got Biden with advanced prostate cancer, and now the whole issue of Russian collusion during the 2016 presidential election. What is going to happen? From Newsmax, and this is from today, May the 19th, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Monday that Israel will take control of the whole of Gaza as the military pressed a newly intensified campaign in the war-ravaged territory. So we've got discussions from Trump, turn Gaza into a freedom zone. 1 million Palestinians in Gaza need to be transplanted to Libya. We've got Netanyahu saying Gaza is going to be under the complete control of the state of Israel. What's going to happen? And I think there are legitimate questions raised regarding, are we going to be led toward some kind of a comprehensive peace agreement, which in some form or fashion will pave the way for the rise of the anti-Messiah. We don't want to be presumptuous because we know a lot of people have said a lot of things, especially in the 1980s and 1990s. But we do have to monitor these things because we definitely know that whatever Israel does militarily right now affects the Jewish community worldwide. It affects anti-Semitism. It affects anti-Zionism. And our final story, and this is something I caught right before we were getting ready, so I'm sure more will be known in the coming day or so. President Putin says that he's had a very frank phone call with President Trump. Are we going to see a resolution to the situation, Russia, Ukraine? What's going to happen there? We do know that President Trump, because around 5,000 people are dying every week, he wants to see the bloodbath stopped. And with Russia, we are dealing with the world's #1 nuclear weapons power. So what's going to happen? We continue to wait and see. There are a lot of things occurring in our world which require us as the people of God to pray. With as many things as we've gone through today, I have to stress how, while we need to be paying attention to them, as they are going to have some kind of direct or indirect, at least, a role to play in the end time scenario. The end time scenario is about the return of Yeshua. It's about seeing the restoration of the kingdom to Israel. It's about seeing a massive worldwide salvation of the Jewish people, acknowledging Israel's Messiah. And it's about all of us seeing the king return to his throne in Jerusalem. And all of these areas of world instability, warfare, whatever they are, subsumed by the reign of the King of Kings. That's why we're here. And we know that we have to continue to wait. We have to continue to see what unfolds in our world. And we need to not be unaware of it. Because I know a lot of people, they get very depressed and they get very upset when they see what's taking place and they don't know what to do about it. So that's a big part of why with Messianic Insider, we have gone 5 times a week, and somebody needs to be having these discussions. As always, on behalf of Outreach Israel Ministries and Messianic Apologetics, I would like to sincerely thank you for your ongoing prayers, encouragement, and donations toward all of our ministry efforts. You can give online at outreachisrael.net/support. We'll see you again tomorrow with another episode of Messianic Insider. Until then, may God bless you, shalom, and take care.